Hi, welcome to this week's episode of This Full Life. So, today we are going to wrap up this month-long journey of talking about making changes in our life, what that looks like, what the biggest areas, the biggest shifts in our life are that we want to make, committing to the changes that we want to make, what that looks like, what the triggers are that show up when we want to make all of these changes, and the patterns that show up in our life, and how we deal with these patterns that show up when we want to make the changes. Similar to the triggers, also when we want to make changes, sometimes we just know that our life isn't working and we want to make these changes. So that's when we get to start recognizing the patterns. So let's just recap like our whole month of what we've talked about. Recognizing the key areas, the biggest shifts, committing to the change and what that looks like, what happens when we commit to this change, because our life can sometimes become completely chaotic when we decide that we're making a major shift in our life. If you've ever made some major shift, committed to making a really big shift in your life or a big change, you are full well aware of what can come up in your life to sabotage. So we're going to talk about that. So when we make changes in our life, it is the opportunity, it gives us the opportunity to become clear on several things. First of all, what's not working and why? What are the areas that I want to change or upgrade in my life? Why is it important to me to change these areas in my life? How am I contributing? What is it that I'm doing in this area that's keeping me stuck, that isn't working for me? How am I contributing to this whole thing? What is my desired outcome? Why is it that I want to make these changes in my life? And again, if you're not quite sure, if you really are clear on what the areas are that you want to change, brilliant. If you're not sure, the main areas that we all usually want to change are our health, like make changes in our health, become healthier, lead a healthier lifestyle, whether that's through food, through exercise, through yoga, through meditation, through learning how to cook differently, how to shop differently. So that's an area that can require a change, or that we want to make a change in. Our relationship. Is it one specific relationship, or is it relationships in general that you would like to have better relationships with the people around you, with your spouse or your partner or your best friend or your coworkers? Are you just wanting to create better relationships? Like maybe you've recognized a pattern that my friends are kind of not the friends that I want to have, or maybe there's a pattern with the people that I am friends with that I'm not crazy about. How can I shift this? Maybe the change that you want to make is with finances. And I blogged about this a couple of blogs ago, that when my husband and I wanted to make a change in our finances and pay off, this debt, like I think there's probably all of us can relate to, there's just this debt that we just keep paying the minimal amount on and it'll eventually get paid. We decided, yep, done with that. Let's just pay it off in several big chunks and be done with that. What came up for me was all areas of sabotage, like things went on sale that I really thought I needed. Just so many areas ready to tell me all the reasons why this wasn't a good idea, and then I needed to have that extra money available. So that was a big sabotage for me, and it was really, in the moment, a struggle, and it was also an opportunity for me to look deeper and just notice what was going on, what the triggers were, what the self-sabotage could potentially be. And another area in your life that might need upgrading is maybe just your home life. Maybe there are areas in your life at home that you just want to shift around, like the relationships in your home, in your family life. Maybe it's what you're doing at home. Maybe it's what you're not doing when you're at home. So check out these areas in your life that are asking for a shift. Here's a really big thing as well that I would love for you to remember is that when you are making shifts and changes in your life, we are absolutely not finger pointing at others or using them or as a scapegoat or using them as a reason to make changes or a reason why we need to make a change. We are the ones who want to make these changes in our life. We are the ones making the changes. It's all about us making these changes. And when we're looking at our life and our situations and taking responsibility as to why we want to make these changes and looking deeper within and finding out what's going on, that's when we actually start realizing we've made this all about us in the best way possible so that it's not about anyone else. It's not about blaming anyone else as to why our life isn't working, why this specific area in our life isn't working like we thought it would or like we wanted it to. When we use others as our blame game or as our scapegoat, we are actually just stepping out of ourselves and not taking that responsibility. If our life isn't working, it's up to us to figure out why. And others might be using a mirror for us to show us why our life isn't working, but others aren't the reason why our life isn't working. Let's talk about patterns. So we get to notice when our life isn't working, one of the easiest ways to find out what isn't working or to start figuring out how to shift it around is by noticing the patterns in our life that show up when these things aren't working. So by noticing what are the patterns, what is most likely, what are we using as a number? And when I say a number, it's when we are checking out of our life. Are we avoiding feeling something and getting on our phone, right? Like a phone can be an absolute checking out modality. It can be a really big number. Are we using food? So maybe we're not even hungry. Maybe there are feelings that are starting to come up within that we're not willing to feel or address. And so maybe this is one of the ways that we check out. Maybe we get on the phone and call someone in avoidance of our feelings. Maybe we start gossiping. If we're feeling really unsure or uneasy within ourselves, maybe we search someone out to gossip with, and that might make us feel better about talking about other people or talking about someone else, potentially making this other person look bad, so we actually don't have to feel our own feelings. So that might be a pattern. Do you want to go shopping and spend money? Going into debt is actually something that makes us feel even worse. And so that could be that keeps us stuck in patterns. So that could be a pattern for you. So I invite you to, in making these big changes, really start being aware of what happens for you when you are checking out. What happens when you start to numb out? What's happening right before? And a lot of times we've never even been taught these different modalities. And so becoming aware of what's going on previously, or maybe there's a nervous energy in your body, in your belly, maybe in your gut. You're not sure why there is that uncomfortable feeling, but it's there. What I invite you to do is to sit with it. Don't try to numb it. Sometimes it can be really uncomfortable to start this situation and to just sit in that uncomfortable space or that anxious space when we don't know what's going on, even when we do know what's going on. Sitting in that space of uncomfortableness or anxiety can be super uncomfortable. So I invite you to ask yourself, what am I uncomfortable with? Why am I uncomfortable right in this moment? And so when your answers start to pop up about why you're uncomfortable or what the anxiety is in the moment, I also invite you to continue to dig deeper. So why am I uncomfortable in this moment? Well, because I feel really anxious. Okay. Why are you feeling really anxious? Well, because I have to give a really big presentation and it makes me feel really anxious to speak in public. Okay, so let's look underneath that. Why is it that I feel really uncomfortable speaking in public? And by and large, most of us do feel uncomfortable speaking in public until we've had so much training, we've gotten rid of underlying beliefs. So when we look at something like public speaking, maybe we have a belief that we are not good enough to be speaking in public, that people aren't going to believe us, or maybe I have a belief that I'm a fraud, or that people are going to make fun of me, or that I'm going to freeze, or I really don't know what I'm talking about. All of these can be underlying beliefs that are causing us this anxiety right in the moment. Let's use another example. When we have to have a conversation that is potentially a triggering conversation for ourselves, that is a hard conversation with our partner. Let's also say that we aren't used to having those conversations with our partner or being the one that brings up tricky conversations. So we're having that anxiety. What is behind that anxiety could perhaps be that we don't know how to start that conversation. We're not quite sure of the words that we want to use for that conversation. Maybe underneath, we aren't feeling worthy of being in that position of, you're not right or wrong, but you feel like you have something that needs to be said and addressed, and you want to bring this up, but you're feeling unworthy for whatever reason. So I encourage you to sit with this space of why the anxiety is there. And so this is the piece of practice that gets you through and onto the other side of all of these uncomfortable feelings that we easily want to numb out with, and that can become triggers. What also, well, you know what? When we find these patterns as well in our life, here's something else that can be a pattern. Drama. I used to be a drama addict. I used to be so addicted to drama until someone pointed it out to me. And I realized that that was a pattern for me that was really holding me back in moving forward in my life. And so when I knew I was ready to make some changes and wasn't quite sure what was going on, just knew that there were things that weren't working in my life, and a friend suggested that I was most likely a drama addict, I had to start looking and realizing that I think I am. So that was a pattern in my life that was creating more chaos. So if there wasn't drama, subconsciously I was looking for drama to create. If there was drama, I was perpetuating this drama. Okay, some other ways of looking for patterns and finding what's not working. Do you find yourself in arguments frequently? Does it seem like there's always one person or one situation that always gets your goat? Like this particular thing always just gets me. That might be an area that you want to look at and see what's going on. How do other people respond to you? Do they normally respond positively? Or do you get a lot of negative responses and people seem to be defensive when you talk to them? That might be an area to look at. Do you get angry more than you'd like? Do you often feel overwhelmed and exhausted? Do you use the same response to conflict? And is that a negative response that elicits more negativity, and then it doesn't seem like the problem gets resolved? Or conversely, do you just avoid conflict altogether? None of these are good or bad. They're just potential ways that might need shifting in your life. If you're wanting to make changes, they might be ways that there are patterns in your life that you can see. Okay, let's talk about when we commit to changes, what happens and how do we make these changes? So what we can expect with 100% certainty is that when we commit to make changes in our life, everything else is going to kind of become chaotic. Roadblocks are going to start popping up, telling us that our ego is going to come in and say, are you sure that these changes are really what you want to make? Do you think this is the best idea? Like, it's so comical of all the ways that our ego tries to take over and tell us that these changes probably aren't good for us. So those closest to us also might realize that we're making changes and it's affecting them. They might start acting differently towards us. They might start responding in different ways than they had previously. So remember, when we are making these changes in our life, we are the ones making them. No one else around us has asked for these changes, and I kind of get giggly about this because when I was really making concrete changes at a particular point in my life, no one else around me asked for these changes, yet I was making really big, profound changes, and it was affecting everyone else because I was shifting how I was showing up in the world in a major way. I was really letting go of a lot of ways that I used to behave in the world, and I was bringing in more positive ways to behave in the world. And when I made these changes, it wasn't really gradual and soft. It was more like bam, 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 and I made these changes. And so everyone else around me was kind of like, I don't know who you are, and I'm not sure what's going on. And so because they weren't on board with me and in my mind to know what was going on with these changes, I had to be more gentle. I chose to be more gentle. I chose to be more gentle with those around me because it could have gone south really fast. They could have decided that the changes I was making was nuts, was crazy, and wanted out of my life because I was making such big changes. So we had to have talks frequently about, this is what I'm wanting to do in my life, and I want to let go of this, and I want to bring in more of this. And so this is how it looks for me. And it might be a little awkward or clunky as I'm going through this. And I still love you. This is what I'm going to do. And so I really had to be open with my family and with those closest around me as I was making these really big changes so that we were still together. We may or may not have been on the same page with the changes, but it didn't mean that I didn't love them any less, that I didn't like them any less, or that I didn't want to be with them any less. I was just making really big changes in my life that I chose to make. And it was clunky for a while. Remind them that this isn't about them, that it's about you making these changes. And don't take their stuff personally, right? Because when you make changes, it's triggering those around you. It's triggering all their stuff of like, oh gosh, should I be making changes? Or it might make them feel bad in a specific way because maybe they feel guilty, or maybe they're choosing to realize that maybe they don't take responsibility for something. So you can be bringing in, just by your changes, all of these triggers in those around you. So don't take it personally. They might have all kinds of reasons why all of their stuff is coming up. They may also have good intentions of letting you know why these changes might not work for you. And so I have experienced all of the above in making really big changes in my life. So I just invite you to, when you make these big changes, to be slow, or you can do it fast, to be mindful of yourself and of what's going on and of those around you while you're making all of these changes. All right, let's talk about triggers and limiting beliefs. So a trigger is anything that sets us off, that irritates us, that angers us, that makes us want to react in a negative way. You know you're triggered when you become defensive and you're on edge. When you're edgy, you're probably triggered. And so a triggered is just an unresolved piece of ourself that hasn't come to light yet. It's just something that someone else has triggered within you when you become angry or agitated, when you become defensive, when you want to talk about somebody else, when you want to gossip. It's actually just a trigger within us of an unhealed, of an unresolved place within us that's ready to be looked at. It's a mirror. A trigger is a mirror that is showing back to us a piece in us that is unresolved, that is unhealed, that is ready to be seen. And it's usually those pieces that we keep buried really deep. And so sometimes we might have to look at these triggers as well. If you think, I would never do that, or that person just does this all the time and it's nothing to do with me. It doesn't have to be the grand scope of whatever this other person is doing. It doesn't have to be the exact example of what this other person is doing. There might be something very small in there that has triggered you, that has got that little hook in you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be triggered. I love to give an example of a trigger. So, you go through your day and some people you just think, oh my gosh, or, a situation happens, or you see a situation and it doesn't even bother you. It just rolls off your back. There's nothing in there that has triggered you. When something triggers you, that's when you know, oh God, there's something in that for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be judging, right? I wouldn't be so judgmental of this other person, or I wouldn't be angry. That is a trigger. So now this is when we are at choice. We get to choose how we react in the moment that we're triggered. So you've realized that you've been triggered. You're at choice. Triggers have the potential to be really volatile. They can take a normal situation and take it into this downward spiral really quickly. And so when we're in this place of being triggered, my last podcast with my friend Amy was brilliant. She used a great example of saying, triggered! And use that as her go-to to realize I'm triggered in this moment and I don't know how to react. I need some space. And would go one or two ways. She would either process it right then and there. Actually, it was one of three ways, I think. It was process it right then and there. Take it to the next step of, yep, I'm triggered right in this moment. I'll figure it out later. And I'm just going to go on in this situation and be neutral. Or realizing that this is really a big trigger for me and I'm going to have to get back to you. I need to stop this conversation. I'll get back to you in 5 minutes, in 5 hours, whenever it is that I know I'm not triggered. And triggers can be really small or really big, depending on our life experience and what this is triggering, what this is really bringing up for us. Triggers are just another place that is ready to be healed within us. As funny as this may sound, triggers are a gift of what can be healed within. And so if you're watching this, you are on the same wavelength as me, as getting through our life is actually just a process of being shown gifts of what we are ready to heal, what we are ready to let go of. Because sometimes we arrive at this space where we are just a big ball of chaos. And how do I let go of this chaos? My life isn't working in this area. I'm overwhelmed in this area. I just feel like something needs to happen because otherwise I'm going to explode. And so that's where we have come to this space of making changes in our life. What is ready for a change? Maybe we don't even know what it is. We just know that our life isn't working. And how can we bring this into a space of my life is working? How can I let go of all of these triggers? How can I recognize all of these places that are ready to be changed? I feel overwhelmed. How can I make these changes? So, in looking at everything that we have just gone over today, I would love to hear your feedback. I would love to hear all the areas in your life that are up for changes, up for shifts, that are ready to be seen. I would love to hear any stories that you have of what changes you're making in your life and what areas show up to try to prohibit these changes. I would love to hear the triggers that come up for you. I'd love to hear how you handle all these different areas. I hope this has served you. I love talking about changes, making changes in your life. This is one of the areas that is so near and dear to me. I will see you next week.